So today we are going to understand the concept of this whole class, that what exactly led us to create this class and how is it going to help you in your CCI journey. What is the structure of the class, what is expected from the class, and of course what is expected from your side to get the maximum benefit from this class, right? So let's start with the first thing. What exactly are we going to cover? What exactly are we going to cover here? And before even that, what is the structure of the exam? So we are of course preparing for the CCI exam, and there are multiple different streams you will see in CCI exam, multiple different subjects you can actually go for. Like you can use this, you can go for CCI routing and switching, which is now called enterprise infrastructure, and that's what we are going to concentrate in this class, CCI enterprise infrastructure. But there are other streams as well, like CCI security, collaboration for voice and video, and CCI wireless and data center as well, which is called CCDE. So different streams are there. So we are going to concentrate on routing and switching or enterprise infrastructure exam. So you'll see that this exam is divided into two parts. One is the qualification exam. That means the exam that you need to pass, a written exam, basically multiple choice question exam, to be able to book the lab. Now, earlier, what used to happen, there was a dedicated qualification exam, a dedicated CCI qual exam, which you had to pass apart from your, which different from your CCNA or CCNP certification. So that exam was literally used to be called the CCI qual exam because it qualified you to be able to book the lab exam, right? But now, one good thing that happened is that they combined the CCNP certification exam and the qualification exam together. So basically, when you pass the Anchor exam of CCNP 35401, it actually works also as the CCI qualification exam. So to pass the CCNP certification or to become CCNP certified, you need one core exam and one concentration exam. So the core exam is called NCORE, and the concentration exam you can choose from one of the available options like routing services, which is called NRC or SD-WAN solution, programmability. These kind of certifications are available for concentration. So when you are on your CCNP journey and you pass the NCORE exam, you also become eligible to book the CCI lab. So if you want to skip CCNP and directly go for the CCI lab, you can do that because there is no prerequisite for CCI. The only prerequisite is the qualification exam. So once you pass this exam, you will actually get 3 years. Uh, Within 3 years, you can book the CCI lab at any point of time. And the current CCI lab, which is active, is called the CCI Enterprise Infrastructure version 1.1. So 1.0 was the old one. I need to update this PPT. The new version is 1.1. Slight changes are there, which we will cover also in our course, right? So this course, as you can see the name Zero to Lab, so it is actually uh, concentrating on the lab configuration part. So we will make sure that we have all the knowledge that we need on the theory basis as well as ample practice so that we can configure the lab in the exam. As you will see later, that the structure of the CCI lab exam. There are some certain parts where you need to do multiple choice questions even in the lab, but most of the part of the lab exam is configuration, and you need to know the topics, the concepts, and you should also be able to configure it in an efficient manner, right? And that's what we are going to target in this class. So the lab exam, it's an 8 hours hands-on based exam, and this 8 hours exam is basically you actually need to travel to one of the Cisco locations and take the exam. So they are called the Cisco lab locations. There are some permanent locations like in San Jose or some other places, RTP in US, Brussels in Belgium, in Europe, and many other places in Europe. Like in Asia Pacific region, it's in India and Bangalore or Sydney or Beijing. So these places, or in Japan, Tokyo, these are the permanent places. And then there are mobile labs also, which means that you can check the schedule. There may be some exams in Bangkok or Singapore, but they will be mobile labs. That means it's not a permanent location. They only set it up for a few days or maybe a week, and you can take the exam at that time, right? So you have multiple locations where you need to appear, and then you will get 8 hours to configure the lab. Now, this lab exam is divided into two parts as well. So the first part is the design part, which is the 3 hours part. And in this one, you don't actually configure anything. It's more of a multiple choice questions, drag and drop, and basically analysis and designing part. You can call it that, in which you need to understand what is the requirement and answer some questions based on the scenario. So if your theoretical knowledge is good, like if you know exactly how switching works, how routing works, how the VPN services work, SD-WAN, configuration, programmability work, then this part will not be very difficult, because they might show you some output of some show commands. They might show you a excerpt from configuration or an email exchange between people, and then based on that, you need to deduce, you need to come up with conclusion that what could be the issue, or what could be one of the solution, and you need to just choose the solution from there, right? So this part needs no configuration. You will not be able to configure anything. You don't need to configure anything, because the configuration comes into the second part. The second part, which is deploy, operate, and optimize. So this is going to be 5 hours, the remaining 5 hours. And in this part, you will get a completely new topology where you need to configure the technologies as they are. So this is something sometimes also called the multi-protocol lab. The reason we call it multi-protocol lab is because you have a single topology and you configure all the technologies on the same topology. You start building it up from layer 2, then you configure layer 3, then you configure IP services, maybe VPN services as well, multicasting configuration, QoS configuration, and then you move on to configuring SD-WAN, SDA, and programmability. So everything is done within the same lab. That's why it is called multi-protocol lab, right? So this is actually divided into three major sections. You will see there are core technologies they will ask you. You can call them the routing and switching core technologies. For example, in layer 2 protocols, layer 3 protocols, IP version 6, BGP, MPLS, DMVPN, quality of service, network address translation. So all the traditional routing and switching configuration, multicasting, and all these things, they will go under the first section. And this is the biggest section in the exam, the section 1 of the deploy, operate, and optimize. This is the biggest section because it needs a lots and lots of configuration. There are many different technologies they will ask you on this part, and this takes the most time out of the 5 hours you have there. Second section is smaller than the first one, but it's still significant, and that's the software-defined networking. So this section will actually ask you questions about the campus side software-defined networking, which is called SDA, software-defined access, and the WAN side SDN solution, which is called SD-WAN. So SDA and SD-WAN configuration will be into the section 2. And the last section, section number 3, is the smallest, and that's about the programmability. The programmability, they might ask you questions regarding the configuration of your routers using netconf or restconf, using Postman software, or using curl command from CLI, some Python programming, embedded event management, which is the EM applet or EM script tool within the router, or within the Cisco iOS, or even the connection between the Python and EM. So those things will be asked. The questions related to this will be asked into the programmability section. But this is the smallest section. Time-wise, you will not actually spend too much time into this part. The major part of 5 hours you will have to spend on the RNS, or routing and switching traditional core technologies. And that's why the in-depth knowledge of core technology is extremely important. But of course, in this course, we are going to make sure that you have in-depth information about not only the core technologies, but also about the SDN technologies and the programmability, like Python introduction, netconf and restconf configuration, how APIs work, and also how we can actually use different softwares like Postman to retrieve or change information on the router, or automate this using the programming like Python programming and EM scripts. We are also going to cover in this part on-box Python, which is basically spinning up a Linux container inside the Cisco router. So you will be have full-fledged Linux operating system running as a separate container inside the router, and we will enable interaction between the router and the Linux container so that you can execute some Python programs or Python scripts right from the Linux container to change the configuration, or to monitor or to retrieve information from the host router which is hosting the Linux container. So all these things will also be covered into the programmability part. Now, it might look like a lot because you only have 5 hours and there are lots of technologies covered. That's why you will see that they are not going to give you completely blank devices. They are not going to ask you to start configuring IP addresses on the devices. So you will see that devices will be partially pre-configured, means you will need to configure the devices only as per the instructions into the lab instruction book, and most of the things will already be there. So you just need to add few things or fix few things to make them working. Now, this is not true for everything, but most of the, I would say 90% of the technology they are going to ask you, especially into the routing and switching traditional part, it will be pre-configured, just needs a little bit more configuration or maybe a little bit of tweaking or modification or addition of some certain things. For example, if they ask you to configure OSPF into DC or in headquarter, you will see that OSPF is already configured, maybe missing on some links or some configuration is missing that you need to add, and then it will start working completely. So although it looks a lot, but most of the things are pre-configured, like DMVPN, the tunnels will be pre-configured, but some things will be missing or misconfigured, which you just need to fix. So it actually doesn't take so much time because you are not doing it from the scratch, right? So this is the lab exam structure. Now, how this course is going to help you in preparing for this lab exam. So let's talk about the course structure that we have. So one thing that we had noticed when we were planning to create this course, Christian and I were planning to create this course, we saw that there are so many courses out there, so many programs out there which are bootcamp style. Now, bootcamp style courses means that the classes actually run for 5 days or maximum 10 days, and they cover all the topics, including all the core routing and switching topics, SDN topics, programmability topics, everything they cover within 5 days to 10 days. And they also show you the practicals, and then the class is done. So we thought that's actually too much, especially if you are coming completely new, like you just passed your CCNA CCNP exam, or maybe you're prepared up to CCNP and don't want to take the CCNP exam, you want to go for CCI. So at that point, you want to learn more, you want to go more in depth, and you want to be comfortable with the technologies. You don't want to rush things. So those kind of bootcamp kind of courses are very helpful for people who are completely prepared, already there, and they just need one extra push before going for the exam. Then it might make sense. But if you want to really prepare and you want to really gain some understanding, some knowledge, some deep concepts, and also ample hands-on experience or exercises so that you feel comfortable with the technology, that requires time. So we thought we want to create something which is spaced out and also going in depth into every individual topic. That's why you will see that in our course, we will have a session once per week. And in this session, we are going to pick one topic each time, and we are going to go in depth, including the hands-on lab. So, for example, we pick up DMVPN or OSPF or BGP or multicasting or SD-WAN. We want to make sure that we start with the logic. We start with the three questions. What is this technology? Why is this needed? Like what problem is it solving? And then of course the most important question, how to configure it. So we tackle it in this particular manner so that you start from scratch. So although you guys must be already having knowledge of routing and switching coming from CCNA or CCNP, we are not going to assume anything. We are going to start everything from scratch. Let's say if I'm starting spanning tree protocol, of course STP is one of the topic which is covered in CCNA and then again in CCNP as well, but we are going to start it again from scratch as if you have never heard of STP. So we are going to start from that approach. Like, what is STP? Why do we need this? And then, of course, how can we configure it? How can we tweak it? How can we control it? And of course, how can we troubleshoot it? So that's why we concentrate on one technology per week. And some topics are big enough like OSPF or BGP or MPLS, so it will go multiple weeks as well, because we want to make sure that we cover all the important aspects of that technology. So the structure of the course is that it is going to be 2 hours per session per week, where I'm going to start explaining a particular topic. So we'll pick up a topic on that day. We will go through all the details that we need to go through, and after that, I'm going to configure the lab for you as well. So there are single protocol labs which will concentrate only a single protocol uh, on that particular week. So let's say if I'm picking up right now for this class, I'm talking about IPsec tunnels. So I'm going to explain you everything what you need to know about IPsec tunnels, and then we will have a lab where I'm going to configure everything step by step according to the lab instructions in front of you in within the Zoom session. And I'm of course not going to configure it quietly. I'm going to explain every single point which I'm doing so that you know exactly why we are doing this and how exactly that needs to be done. So theory backed by the hands-on practical within the same Zoom session. And then after the Zoom session is done, I'm going to send you the same lab so that you guys have the whole week to go through the lab configuration. You can practice it whenever you want. And we know that you guys are working professionals, so it's not that you have 24 hours every day just for CCI practice. That's why you have ample time. You have 7 days. So whenever you can get some time, you can actually practice configuring that lab. And whatever we are doing in this Zoom session, it will be recorded. So you can watch the recording. Although the recording might be from one of the previous classes of the same level, like zero to lab. So you will get the same information from that recording as well. But ultimately, you will get all the important information from the recording if you want to do a refresh. And this is a very good uh, time right now to point out that you should always have a mindset of learning. So you need to have a paradigm shift. Don't try to test yourself unless until you have to test yourself when it comes to that point, right? So throughout this the tenure of this course, always have a mindset of learning. Means when I'm teaching something, you are of course gaining the experience, so that is natural. You will be learning that time. But when you are doing the lab, don't try to test yourself. Okay, I learned it. I saw it into the Zoom session. I have the lab in front of me. I must be able to do it without looking any answer or solution. That's not the objective here. The objective is to learn. So when you are doing the lab, that time also you are learning, right? So feel free to go and check the solution file. That's why I'm going to send you the lab file, as well as I'm also going to send you the solution file, so that anytime you get stuck or you don't remember a particular command or structure, feel free to go and check the solution file and make sure you know that, because that time also your mind is registering, your brain is registering everything. It is learning everything. So it will say, okay, I got stuck at this point. I saw the solution and now I know what command needs to be used, right? So just keep a learning mindset even when you're doing the labs. And of course, if you see a solution file and you can see the solution, but you don't understand it, why is it done like that? You will also have the instructor support. So you can always contact me on the Facebook group. So we have a very good community of students on our Facebook group where you can ask questions and you will get answer from me. Some other students who are very experienced or have done this course before, they might also chip in. Or even if somebody else is also thinking about or wondering about that question, they can benefit the answer given there. So we recommend to ask questions on the Facebook group. But also when you're watching the recording on our website later, there is also a comment section below the video where you can ask questions. So there are multiple ways to reach out to me and ask the question. Of course, I'm talking about the off time when we don't have the Zoom session. Within the Zoom session, you can ask the question anytime in the chat. And after the Zoom session, we always open the mic again for a quick Q&A session in case if you have any question from the existing topic in hand or from one of the previous topics you did last week or before previous weeks, you can ask the question at any point of time, right? So as I mentioned, the course structure will be 1 hour instructor-led topic discussion and 1 hour will be the lab for the same topic. So one thing you will notice is that although it is 2 hours per session, but this class is not time-driven class. It's a topic-driven class. It's a concept-driven class. So when we take a particular topic, these are not rigid times. Like it's not going to be strictly 1 hour of topic discussion and strictly 1 hour of lab. Sometimes I might actually go for 1.5 hours just going through the theory because the topic is important. We need to understand the complete curve of the technology before we get to the hands-on, right? Or sometimes it may even finish before 1 hour if it's a smaller topic. Same thing for the whole session. Sometimes it might go beyond 2 hours slightly. Sometimes it might be well under 2 hours. So it depends on the topic, not on the time, right? It's a topic-driven class. We want to make sure that whatever we take that week, we understand it completely. We are comfortable with the concept, and we have done the lab as well right here into the class. So I will do the lab in the class, but then during the week you can do the same lab because I will send you immediately after the class. I will send you the lab and the solution file as well, right? So the same lab along with the solution will be sent to you. And although this next point is recommended, not required, but it will actually just to keep track of what you guys are doing or if you are following the labs or not. So if you complete the lab, you can actually send me the configuration on the written email before the next session. But this is just a recommendation. If you think that you already did the lab and there was no issue, you can skip this part as well. And if any issues, you can refer to the solution file. And if solution file is not clear, as I mentioned, you can always contact me and ask me as well, right? So how this program can help? So as you can see that mentioned this already, that the main thing missing in a lot of programs is a lot of practice. So you understand the concept, but then you want to practice, right? So that's why this program addresses this issue with a lots of single protocol labs. So we have more than 50 single protocol labs which we'll go through for the core technologies. And this doesn't even include the SDN technology or programmability, just the core routing and switching topics I'm talking about. And all these labs are called single protocol labs, right? So these will be configured and explained by me, and then you can configure it in the same week. So this is actually a great way to understand the topic and immediately implement it so that it registers more in your brain and you understand it more. So it always is the same thing. When you learn something, you think that you understood it, but when you start configuring it, you say, okay, this is how it works. So now I understand it more, or now I understand it correctly. That's why the hands-on are extremely important, and you need to have some time to grasp the concept and do it couple of times, maybe 3 times if you have enough time in a week before going to the next topic next week. So instead of cramming all the things within a week or 10 days, we make sure that we pace out and understand everything, and we slowly and steadily build the solid foundation that we need for the exam. Detailed solution files for the practice lab. So just to give you an example, for example, if I'm going to send you an OSPF lab that day, so because it is concentrating on a single protocol or single technology, these are called the single protocol labs, where I will give you the instructions, what you need to do, and you need to configure it accordingly, right? It's the best step. So remember, the same lab I am going to solve within the Zoom session. So you already have seen me solving this. And then I've sent you this lab. So you can try it. And if you get stuck anywhere, you can always refer to the solution file, where I'm also telling you exactly what needs to be configured per router to get the result that you need to do, right? So, and I'll also provide you with the diagram according to the lab. So, for example, if it is OSPF, we have to divide the routers in different areas. So that is something you can see into the diagram, like which one is area 0, area 1, area 2, area 3. Area 3 we can see is discontinuous here because not connected directly to area 0. So we will need virtual link solution and all. So all these things you will also get after the class so that you can practice it as well, right? So just to give you an example of the detailed solution file that I'll also provide you. Also, there will be a Q&A session in every Zoom session after the class is finished. And you can also ask the question, as I mentioned, on the Facebook group. We are also going to cover SD-WAN and SDA, which is basically the WAN side and the LAN side solution of software-defined networking. So this is also something I'm going to assume you don't know anything. Maybe you already know something, you already have practiced it before, but I'm going to start from scratch. Like what exactly is software-defined networking? The concept is to decouple the control plane and data plane so that the control plane can be centralized on a controller. And how does it work in different kind of solutions, right? Cisco also has Viptela and Meraki, two different solutions. What is the difference between these two, and which one is actually covered into the CCI exam? Programmability and automation also, we are going to do lots of practicals. So we are going to start with the concept of different data formats like JSON, XML, Jinja, and also what exactly is the difference between these YAML data. Then what kind of transport protocols can we use? What is the difference between netconf and restconf? And how can we use them to retrieve the information from the router or change the information on the router? We are going to see the practicals of those as well. Are there any CLI commands or are there any GUI softwares for these protocols like Postman? We are going to see that as well. We are also going to cover here Python. And again, if you have no idea about Python at all, don't worry, we will start from scratch. So although it is the networking module, you need to learn into the CCI, but we start from the core basic of Python. So we understand the different structure, what are the variables in Python, what do we mean by loops in Python, what are the different kind of string architecture, for example, what is the meaning of a list or a dictionary, and how do we actually can use them to benefit for our own purposes. And we will have a lot of different Python is example scripts as well, so that you can understand how exactly it is working. Then of course we will come to the main part in Python where we use it to automate some configuration on the router. So automation part of this will actually cover how we can send the netconf and restconf instructions to the router using a Python program. And also we will see how we can use onbox Python, where the CLI module can be used to execute commands on the router. Finally, we are also going to cover EEM, embedded event management, where you can actually trigger a Python script in a router based on some certain events. So if somebody went ahead and shut down a port, and that port is not supposed to be shut down, that can actually trigger an event which will execute a Python script which will unshut the port immediately and maybe record who was the user who did this, what was the time he did this, and maybe send an email also to the administrator. So these things can also be done by combining the Python and EEM. So these are things also we are going to cover into programmability and automation part. And of course, at this point, by the point you reach here, we have done the single protocol labs, means talking about different technologies separately. But in the exam, you have to configure everything. Of course, it is not at the same time. Step by step, you will configure layer 2, layer 3, and so on. But you need to configure everything in the same lab, which is called the multi-protocol lab, right? So we are also going to have a full actual exam like multi-protocol lab to practice. As a matter of fact, you will see that the topology that we are using is exactly the same topology you will see in the exam. And the reason is because Cisco itself has published the CCI lab topology. The reason is because it's not a design exam. So they don't want you to waste time in understanding the connectivity and what IP addressing is used and how the traffic is flowing. They don't want to waste your time on understanding the topology. So topology is already published, but of course they will ask you the question of the technologies, and those you need to know so that you can configure them, right? So to give you an example, this is one of the diagram of multi-protocol lab. As you can see that it has a lot of routers and different sections are there. For example, we have headquarters, data center connected to the internet, and the data center and headquarters are also connected to the branches. Like here we have branch 3 and branch 4. And how are we connecting the data center to the branches? We are using the help of this service provider, and we are configuring the DMVPN tunnels over this service provider. So we don't want to exchange our private routes with the service provider. So with service provider, we just run eBGP and exchange the routes enough so that we have the connectivity between the edge routers, like router 21 in DC to router 61, 62, and 70 in the branches. And once you have the connectivity, you can create a private IP address tunnel, which is called the DMVPN tunnel, on the top of your service provider reachability network. You can call it service provider the underlay, and DMVPN is the overlay. And then we can exchange our private routes over the tunnel, so it doesn't go to the service provider or it doesn't get leaked into the service provider network. Don't worry if you don't understand this concept right now, because we are going to cover in detail. I'm just explaining you that multi-protocol labs will have multiple branches and You will have to start configuring with switches, with layer 2 configuration, and then routing, like you can see OSPF and BGP, IP version 6, EIGRP, DMVPN, MPLS in the service provider network, and some of the DHCP DNS configuration on the switches here, right? So IP services will also be covered. So a lot of things will be covered, internet access configuration and all these things. If you're wondering why do we have only branch 3 and branch 4, because for the SD-WAN, we have a separate topology where you will see that the first part will be same, data center part will be same, but we will use branch 1 and branch 2 where we will have the SD-WAN devices. In the real exam, you will have all 4 branches into the same topology, branch 1, 2, 3, 4. Here we have actually separated them because of the resource need that you will need for SD-WAN. SD-WAN alone itself needs a lot of resources. So if you combine both of them, it might need too many resources. And if you are using a laptop with 16 gig of RAM, uh, that might not be enough. You might need 32 gig or even 64 gig in that case if you want to run everything at the same time, right? So you don't need to worry about that because we have separated these two into 2 different labs and we cover them separately as well. And also, I'm going to include some troubleshooting tips and the instructor support throughout the course duration. Troubleshooting, I always say, it depends on your foundational knowledge. For example, if the OSPF neighborship is not coming up, you need to know that what is supposed to be exchanged between two routers in the hello messages in OSPF. For example, in OSPF, the router IDs must be unique, but the timers must match. If authentication is configured, password must match, area ID must match. So you can actually see if these things are matching or not. If the things need to be unique, they are unique or not. So if you know the foundational knowledge, troubleshooting becomes easy. So we'll make sure that we have the ample foundational knowledge to make sure we are comfortable in troubleshooting as well, right? And of course, this program can help you because you have the access to the class recordings for lifetime. So even life can happen, right? And maybe you are prepared for the exam, but you got stuck in some other things and you couldn't take the exam at that point. And after few months, you came back and you say, okay, I need to refresh my knowledge on few things. So don't worry, your class recordings will be available for lifetime, right? So it's not that it is only for the duration of this program. After 5 years also, if you want to come back and refresh your knowledge, you can do this. And also, let's say if you are coming back in 5 years uh, and there are new technologies or complete revamp of the complete CCI program, we are going to update our recordings according to that. So you will get the latest information whenever you are going to check your recordings, right? So how exactly are we going to do all these practicals? So are we going to use some kind of simulation or emulation software? So as you might have already seen my email, I have sent you an EVNG OVA. So we use EVNG software on VMware. So you will see that EVNG is a software which allows you to emulate the devices. So it's not a simulator, it's an emulator. Now, what is the difference between a simulator and emulator? So, simulator actually simulates the routing and switching environment. That means there is a software which is acting just like a router or a switch. So, it responds back with the configuration which looks similar to what a router and switch would look like. But actually, it's not using any real operating system. So, it doesn't support all the features like packet tracer. Cisco's packet tracer is a simulator. But an emulator actually uses the real operating system images of routers, switches, SD-WAN devices, or CSR routers in the backend. So you have the actual iOS devices, Internet of Operating System images in the backend. Just that the front end is not a hardware; it's the virtual machine or the software, right? So you get all the commands that you would generally get, or will be available in a real router or a switch. And the best thing about EVNG is that it is not very resource hungry. So in most of the cases, you will see that with the nominal resources, you can use it. Like for routing and switching labs, the 50 or something single protocol labs that we are going to do, you can do them with 8 gig of RAM also. But for SD-WAN and programmability, I would recommend to have at least 16 to 32 gig of RAM, and 16 gig is enough for making it work. But if you want a smoother experience, especially in SD-WAN, 32 gig RAM is recommended. And I always tell people that if you are preparing for CCI, it's a big commitment, and it's a very, very important exam. So it is always worth considering some a little bit of investment into a small server where you dedicate it only for your CCI preparation. So you can actually, if you are buying a desktop PC nowadays, they are dirt cheap. Like second-hand PCs also, you can have 16 gig, 32 gig RAM. The good thing is that you don't need any GPU or anything for this. All you need is a decent processor, not even high end, and more RAM. It's more RAM that you need for EVNG, right? So later in the course, maybe you don't need to do it now, but let's say once we reach to the SD-WAN part, it might be a good idea to invest in a very cheap server and then just use it dedicatedly only for the CCI preparation. But again, you don't need this. It's just a recommendation. Your laptop, if it has 16 gig of RAM, that will also be more than sufficient for this. One thing you will notice about EVNG is that it is just emulation software, right? It's actually Ubuntu Linux operating system, nothing else, which uses KVM in the backend. So it doesn't have any images or anything. So you cannot start using routers, switches, SD-WAN devices if you just download EVNG, because EVNG is a free software. You can download it from their website, evng.net. But the problem is that once you download it, you will have to procure iOS images from somewhere. You have to copy them somehow into the Linux operating system. Then you need to know a little bit of Linux also to set the licensing of the devices from the Linux console. And once the licensing is done, then you can open the GUI of EVNG and you will be able to fetch some routers, switches, SD-WAN devices, and you will be able to boot them and use them. But then the problem comes, okay, how do I create the topology? Because I need to practice all the important topics. So for that, you will have to think different topologies, right? So we wanted to make sure that we take all the hard work away from your side and all the unnecessary thing away from you, so that you can concentrate on the important stuff, on the technologies, CCI topics, right from day one. So that's why the OVA that I sent you, it's a complete package. Means when you import it into VMware, you will see that it's a full-fledged working EVNG with the iOS images and everything already copied into the system, already licensed, and the topologies are pre-built. So you will see that the topologies are already set in EVNG for different purposes. So you will see that there are some base lab topologies, some switching topologies, and then there will be a multi-protocol lab topology. So you don't need to create it on your own. You can directly start the devices and start using them to learn your technologies right from day one, right? So we take all the unnecessary work away from you so you don't waste your time into that, and you can directly start using your devices uh, for your topic preparation or learning the concepts. This actually is more important for SD-WAN, because SD-WAN licensing is a nightmare, and especially if you're doing in a virtualization, it becomes very difficult. So we took that part away. You can directly concentrate on learning SD-WAN from when we start the SD-WAN part. You don't need to worry about licensing part at all, right? So just to give you an example, when you import the OVA into VMware and you boot it up, you will see that the OVA will show you this screen, where basically it's the EVNG is nothing but a Linux operating system. So it shows you this Linux login screen. It shows you the IP address to open the GUI, like 192.168.79.137 here. And then it is asking you for the username password here. So if you want to log into the CLI of EVNG, means if you want to log into the Linux operating system, the username is root, as you can see here in the first line, and the password is EU, EVE. So you can log in here by providing this information, root and EU. But the question is, do you need to log in here? And the answer is no, you don't need to log into the CLI of EVNG at all, because you need to practice all the things, all the single protocol labs, multi-protocol labs from the GUI. So you just need to note down this IP address. So once you boot it, you see this screen, you don't need to log in. Just note down the IP address and open this in one of the browsers, right? So when you open this IP, it will actually bring you to this login screen for you. Here the username passwords are admin and EU. So the username is not root, unlike the CLI. So your username is admin and the password is EU, EVE, which is the name of the software, right? EVNG. So you type the username password, you log in, and you actually get to this screen here. Now you can see that there are some certain topologies already pre-built. So if I click on this base lab and you click on open, you can see that it will open this topology where some routers are already connected and they already have some startup config. Means if you see, these routers already have the IP addressing configured, some loopbacks created, but no routing, because we want to start learning the routing within the lab, right? We want to practice it. So IP addressing is something you will already you will see it is already pre-configured in the exam, also in CCI exam. So you don't need to waste your time in configuring IP address every single time. So let's say you did your OSPF lab 1 and you want to start OSPF lab 2. You want to concentrate on OSPF, right? You don't want to spend your time again in typing the IP addresses. That's why whenever you go to the more action and wipe all nodes, it will go back to the pre-config, which is just the IP addressing, so that you can start configuring routing, switching, or MPLS, DMVPN, whatever technologies we are going to cover. Now you can see that this is the base lab, and when I send you the lab, sorry, this is the base topology, and when I send you the lab, I tell you that which topology you need to open. So you can see you use the base topology, it says, and then it tells you what needs to be done. Similarly, if you have a switching question, it might ask you to open a different topology. But you can see this is the same topology. The diagram that I will send you with the lab, it will just tell you the boundaries of different areas, or if you're using like OSPF, boundaries of different autonomous systems, and so on. But you can see it is the same lab. There are 8 routers here, and the same routers you see in this lab as well. So it is just showing you the details. Also, when you see the first week in the videos, if you go to our website, log into your account, and you go to the Zero to Lab course, one of the first videos you will see is the EVNG setup. So definitely, I would recommend go and watch this video this week, so that you know exactly how to import the OVA, how to boot it up, and also it tells you how to start the devices, stop the devices, how to access them, and also how to save your progress. Because sometimes you will see that, especially in multi-protocol lab, you might not be able to complete this in a single sitting. So let's say you configured few things, and next time you want to start from the same point, you want to progress from the same point. You don't want to go back to the uh, no configuration. So how to save the configuration, how to retain the configuration at the next reboot, and once you are done and you want to restart again, how to erase everything also and go back to just the IP addressing. All these things you will see in that video. So highly recommended. Watch that video this week so that you are ready, and also import the OVA this week as well, right? So you will see that the lab files that I send you every week, they will have the information about what you need to do on this topology, and the solution file will help you in case if you get stuck, right? So as I was mentioning earlier also, that during the off days, you are encouraged to do the labs again, and you feel free to contact me anytime you have any questions. So you can contact me on the Facebook, or below the recording, there is a comment section as well. If you mention something there, it also comes directly to me. So you can ask questions there as well. So speaking of EVNG, as I told you that EVNG already has all the topologies in the OVA, and I have already sent you the OVA. So if somebody hasn't received OVA, let me know on the email, and I will send it again. And you will see that this course is divided also into 3 parts, just like the real exam. So we will start with the core technologies first: switching, routing, VPN technology, security technology, IP services, and all. So for that part, for the first 49 to 50 labs, you don't need more than 8 gig of RAM. So even if you have a laptop with 8 gig of RAM only, that will be more than sufficient. But for SD-WAN, recommended minimum required RAM is 16 gig, where it can work, but it might be slightly slower. So 32 gig is the recommended one for the SD-WAN. But don't worry, SD-WAN we will come much later into our course. So you do have time, maybe if you want to invest some money into buying a dedicated server for this. I think a couple of $100 you can buy a server from eBay or something, and that will be more than sufficient. You don't need the latest machine here, right? You don't need a gaming PC for this. just that a little bit more RAM, that should be sufficient. After importing the OVA, although you need to make sure that you adjust the RAM according to your requirement. Like for example, in my PC, I have 128 gig RAM, 128 gig RAM, so I can give more. If you only have 16, you may have to adjust accordingly. So make sure that you adjust the RAM and also set the network interface to NAT, network address translation, so that you will be able to access your devices from your host machine as well. I mean, sorry, your access your EVNG from your host machine and can open the GUI. So the IP address that you see here, this IP address will only show up if your network interface is properly connected to the correct type of interface, right? So, for example, you can see here in this diagram, when you import the OVA and the EVNG virtual machine is created, you can go to the settings of the virtual machine, and there you can see the memory. You can set how much you want to set, and network adapter type is set to NAT. Make sure that is done, and then you can start the device. And in that way, you will always get an IP address which is reachable from your host machine, so that you can open the GUI of the VMware or of the EVNG, right? So that's the structure. We saw the exam structure, we saw the course structure, and we saw what tools we are going to use and what technologies we are going to cover. Now let's talk about one last thing, which is what is expected from your side. So from your side, I just want you to show up, do the labs, and ask questions. Most important part is be consistent. Consistency will give you great results, because if you week by week showing up and just doing the labs, even if you don't retain all the information, don't worry, nobody does, nobody remembers everything. But the important thing is to understand the logic. Like if you know how DMVPN works, if you know exactly what is the difference between phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, then the commands will come to you. When you practice it 3-4 times, you will start remembering the commands. You don't need to be able to remember everything right from day one. That's why I said, when I send you the lab, always feel free to see the solution file as well, right? But be consistent in the class, and that will give you a great result. A little bit about myself. My name is Arpit Pandit, and I have been in training industry for more than 18 years. I have taught Microsoft courses, Linux courses, Juniper, Cisco, of course, and also AWS cloud engineering, and some other niche courses like QoS or in-depth multicasting or MPLS traffic engineering, service provider courses as well I have taught. And for CCIE specifically, I have more than actually 12 years now, 12 years of training experience. I myself have two CCIEs. One is in, it used to be called routing switching, which is the enterprise infrastructure now, and service provider. So I did these two CCIs. And I also have a good practical experience because of my consultation work with the service providers. So I do work as a consultant with service providers, and I always keep an eye on the latest technologies, so that we can include some of that experience into our classes as well. Like SD-WAN or SDA, what exactly is going on? So many service providers, especially SD-WAN, they are very interested. There are so many different options we have nowadays. Of course, Cisco's Cryptela is one of the options, but there are other. Juniper also has jumped into SD-WAN, and there are some third-party solutions as well. So we will see that SD-WAN is a big technology in service provider, and learning that can help you a lot into getting into that world as well, right? So with that, let's get started. Thank you very much, and let me know if you have any questions. So